So welcome back to the third video in Module 2. We've talked about where this new topic, exploratory data analysis, fits into what we've been doing, and we've given a general description of what it is. And now we want to actually apply it to a categorical variable. So we're going to start with a categorical data set, and we're going to learn how to do each of these 4 steps. Before we get into the mechanics, let's talk a little bit about why we would want to inspect a data set and what it is we're looking for. So first of all, whenever we get a data set, especially if we're not familiar with the data we're looking at, we want to get a feel for what values the variable can actually take on. We also want to understand what they mean. So we want to know exactly what is this variable, and are there any units with them? And sometimes this comes directly from the data set. Sometimes there's an accompanying description called metadata that will explain, for example, the coding of a categorical variable, or the units for a quantitative variable. One of the main things we're going to focus on in this video are what we call suspect data values. And we're going to see there are several different ways that data values can mess with our analysis. We're going to learn what they are and how to detect them and what to do with them. And if we find bad data values, then we want to clean the data, and we're going to learn when to do that and how. So what can make a data value bad? Well, there are 3 types of data values that can cause us problems when we're doing EDA. The first is what's called invalid data values. So these are values that are not possible. They're obvious errors. The next is outliers. These are values that in principle could occur, but they're unlikely. So to give you an example that helps you distinguish between invalid and outlier, suppose your variable was heights of individuals, and you had data on an individual that said he was 12 feet tall. That's obviously invalid. Maybe there was some sort of error in entering the data or something like that. If, on the other hand, you saw an individual that was listed as being 7 feet tall, that's unlikely, but it's possible. That would be an outlier. It's an extreme value, so to speak. Now, with categorical variables, we're lucky. We don't have to worry about outliers. They don't make sense in the context of a categorical variable. And last, we're going to talk about missing data values. So it's very often the case that you work with data sets, especially if they're very large, where there's going to be a significant number of data values missing. What do you do with that? The way that we attack all of these problems is we sort the data set. So when we're looking at categorical data specifically, the way that we determine whether or not a data value is invalid is we sort the data values. And the nice thing about categorical variables is they can only take on a fixed number of known values. So if we see anything that isn't one of the expected values, we're going to suspect that's invalid. For example, if I'm looking at gender, I'm going to expect to see male, female. Now I might see something different. Maybe I'm going to see transgender, I see a T. Then I'm going to have to go back and either talk to the person that collected the data, or I'm going to have to look at the metadata key. But if there's nothing that indicates that there should be anything other than male, female, then I'm going to assume that that is an invalid data value. Missing data values are another issue. The book goes into a long discussion of missing data values, and I'm going to disagree with some of what they say, and I'm not going to get into the details that they do. Usually in a lot of programs, missing data is simply ignored. So both in Excel and StatCrunch, if you have a cell that is empty, both programs just act like there's no data there. So we don't have to worry about it. The book suggests that you delete the entire record for an individual if it has a missing data value. And I'm going to disagree with that. Data is very expensive to collect. And just because you're missing a data value, since it's not analyzed anyhow, you can generally ignore it. The only time it becomes an issue is when we want to look at 2 variables together. And obviously, if we have the value of one missing, then that person's data is going to be, it's not going to be useful to us, right? And in that case, we might want to delete that individual. And we're going to talk later on when we get to quantitative variables in more depth about things we can do in various sorts of cases where we have suspect data values. The categorical data is going to be pretty easy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually run through how we do this using the example from the book. So this is a little meme from Reddit. This was a picture taken over the summer, and they had all of these, sequels, right? And so the title is the 90s called They Want Their Movies Back. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and see what percentage of movies actually are sequels or part of franchises. So to do that, you can hover over this hyperlink that will take you to a Google Sheet, press down Control, and Enter. And if you have a Mac, I forget there's a slightly different command. And here's our data set. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to download this as an Excel sheet. And I have a video that shows you how to do this if you want to step through it a little in a little more detail or a little slower. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I want to download as an XLSX data set. And I'm going to save this to a dedicated folder. The nice thing about StatCrunch is StatCrunch actually saves data sets that you've downloaded. So, you could just say, hey, I know this is in the downloads folder. StatCrunch can go there, import it into StatCrunch, and you'll have a copy. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this at a dedicated folder. So I have a folder just for data sets, and I'm going to save it in there. And there we go. And now we're going to open up StatCrunch, which you can do from your My Lab and Mastering. Click on the StatCrunch link, and you click on Visit StatCrunch website. Going to open StatCrunch. And now I'm going to load the data from my computer. I'm going to simply search and find that folder and select that file. And if you didn't save it any place particularly, it will be in your downloads folder. Oh, I can't open a file that's being used, so I have to close this. Okay. I could write more information in here. I'm not at the moment. And I'll just upload this. And now we've imported a data set in Excel. And this is how you're going to import most of the data sets. They're going to be hyperlinks on Google Sheets, download it as Excel, and then just import it. And I'm interested here in this variable, whether or not a movie is either a sequel or part of a franchise. And so I'm going to go ahead and sort that. So I'm going to go to Data, Sort. If you're familiar with Excel, you know this is exactly like the Excel command, right? I want to sort. I want all of these rows to move when I sort this particular column. So I'm going to sort all columns. And I'm going to choose the variable, sequel or franchise. You could do ascending or descending, it doesn't really matter. And I don't have to mess with these options. And I click Compute. And it tells me what was done. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. Okay, so it's sorted in ascending, means it starts with the first letter and starts with the smallest letter and goes up. So it'll go from no to yes. I'm going to look for invalid or missing data values. So first of all, I expect no. I expect to only see N and Y. So when I scroll down, I'm going to look for the boundary between the N's and the Y's. and see if there's anything that shouldn't be there. And here's the borderline right here, so I don't see any other possible values between n and y. I'll scroll to the bottom just to make sure. And sure enough, we don't have any invalid data values. We also don't have any missing data values. So our data looks good. And this is how we do the data inspection for a categorical variable, in particular using StatCrunch.